or 90% off. So if you consider what $2,500 was, you know how much was involved in Judy's contribution for buying it all retail from Stampin' Up. It was really something. But once we get, our microphones are coming. But we'll say anyway. For those that don't remember, I'm dressed like George Washington because he had brown pants and a blue shirt, and that's why all us men, all have a blue blazer and have, like Tim over here. We're all dressed patriotically. Sue and I are dressed patriotically.
I'm dressed like the flag.
She's got red and white, and I've got red and blue, and I've got a blue blazer, and we're both white. So red, white, and blue. You notice this morning that Dr. Brooks read the statement from the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. That statement has been called the most important sentence on the impact of history ever written in all time. The most important sentence. Walter Isaacson, the biographer, says that about that sentence. And when you think about it, it's true. It did use that old lawyer's trick, however, when it says, it is self-evident. Lawyers do that, It is self-evident that I didn't kill that person. And that's, if you say that, at that point in time, it was nothing like self-evident. I mean, it was not self-evident. Nobody would have thought that it was self-evident, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, we're glad you're back today. If you weren't here from last week, you should go home and watch it on YouTube, because I promise you that last week was about the Christian traditional founding fathers, and this week is about the Enlightenment founding fathers. Now, none of them were called founding fathers until the 1920s. Would you believe that? They weren't even talked about in that sense. They were George Washington's house, Mount Vernon. If it hadn't been for the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, it would have been fallen apart long ago and wouldn't even be here today. So it's really quite amazing. But anyway, you got the traditional Christian founding fathers, which should tell you that the culture around stuff was very Protestant tradition, and most of the people you've hardly ever heard of were active Christians. But the main leaders that we're talking about who said all the things that you remember, the main people that you think of as founding fathers were people who were influenced more by the Enlightenment than they were by their Christian faith. And if you remember the verse Sunday that I taught, I told you, when you're evaluating people, look at two things: what they do and what they write down. Because from my point of view anyway, what you do is more important than what you say you believe. But that's my modern point of view. But because you put yourself in action based on what you do. So today we're going to talk about the founding fathers who are the ones that you think of as founding fathers. We've got them right up here: Jefferson, Franklin, and Madison. And they are all more informed by their Enlightenment views than their Christian views. We'll tell you more about their religion stuff as well. But you should also remember that even though God is mentioned 6 times in the Declaration of Independence, how many times is God mentioned in the Constitution? 0. There are no, the Constitution is an Enlightenment document. Declaration of Independence is more of a religious document in that sense, in my opinion. She may disagree. But anyway, I promise you jokes. They're really bad today. Ben Franklin, who wrote all those affirmations, early to bed, early to rise, unless there's a party. Did you know that the U.S. Constitution protects us men to wear short sleeve shirts? Yeah, we have a right to bear arms. What is the difference between the U.S. Constitution and the Chinese Constitution? They both guarantee the right to freedom of speech, but the U.S. Constitution guarantees freedom after speech, and the Chinese Constitution doesn't guarantee that. Oh well. Anyway, on to our guides for the day. This is the Age of Reason, it's called. They were the major writers and decision makers in writing the Constitution after the Revolutionary War. I have one other picture. It's up there that anybody can name the third person in there. I'll give you a star. I regard him as one of the most important of the Enlightenment thinkers. No, you've got Hamilton. Hamilton was last week. He was a traditionalist.
Say it loud.
Somebody got a contribution they want to make?
Say it loud.
What? Thomas Paine. Who's our spy person?
That's my grandson. Just saying.
Yeah, Thomas Paine. We don't have time to talk much about him, but he wrote a pamphlet called Common Sense. And if it hadn't been for that pamphlet, Ben Franklin says the people would never have been behind the revolution. He was really an atheist. He went back to France, was involved in the French Revolution, all that kind of stuff.
Oh.
All you have to, boy, how do you deal with this? This is hers. Every time you touch it, it moves. We're talking about the age of reason and rationality. Rather than revelation, rather than scripture, the decisions are made on the reasonableness of man and our rationalism. It's the beginning of the scientific age. We have a little drawing there, if you can read it, which is kind of interesting. We get the notion that you have individual rights and liberty from the Enlightenment. Before that time with Revelation, God said it, you believe it, that settles it. In the Enlightenment, they came along and said, reason makes a difference. You got to put your reason to work. A guy by the name of Descartes came along and said, look, there's a basis for human reason to make an impact on you. So before this time, if it was written in the Bible, if the bishop and the priest said it, half the people couldn't read, more than half anyway. They depended on what the preacher said, unlike you who don't depend on anything the preacher, well, we won't go into that. But revelation and reason, okay? And all your natural rights that Jefferson and them talk about emerge not from revelation, but from reason. So when he says all that men are created equal, self-evident, it's by nature, not by revelation. The Enlightenment people were very critical of authority. Now that makes a lot of sense when you think about the old system where the king decided what you believed and how you lived. And he decided, well, let's make Sue a knight or a lady and let her have property, where David over here, he's just a peon. He didn't get anything. So most of the people in England were peasants, and a few of them were on the top. That was the royalty people. And we were very critical of that. They had a skepticism of any group that had power. If you talk to any of these founding fathers, the thing they were most afraid of was a demagogue would come along and would seduce all you people into believing the right thing and let them have all the power to do whatever they wanted to do. They had a skepticism of power, which is why they did the checks and balances, to try and say, okay, we got to put this group in charge here, and this group in charge over there, and the power will be balanced out. Their notion was that the president would be balanced out by the Congress, because if the president did something the Congress didn't like, they would say, hey, you can't do that. Well, I don't have an answer to that question, other than the one I heard discussion today was that the founders never envisioned political parties. And now political parties have the loyalty of the people, and so they vote as a bloc. And so Congress, they never could possibly envision that the Congress would give up their power to anybody. And now, all you do, I don't think this is a political statement at all, but look at the votes that we get. Republicans vote one way all the time, and Democrats vote the other way all the time. So they have more loyal, and they don't care whether the Congress has power, they care whether their party has power. They also believed in progress. They believed that, this follows if you believe in reason and the dignity and goodness of man instead of the depravity of all of us, you're going to believe that we could get better and better, right? Benjamin Franklin thought every day and every way, better and better. We're going to have progress in our approach. And if what do we have to do to have progress? We just get everybody educated. What do we do to have a democracy? Have informed citizens. They didn't take into account social media today. You are aware that what happens when you click on something, if you read some little quirk about a political thing, you click on it, then it recognizes that that's your prejudice, and then you're going to get everything from that point of view is going to keep coming to you. So if you sign up to something from Senator Warren, then you're going to get all the liberal stuff. If you sign up for somebody else, you're going to get all the conservative stuff. So you're not going to get any balance. And from my point of view, that's true too for television. You got Fox on one side and MSNBC on the other. And so, anybody watch both? I try to watch both. Both Fox and MSNBC or CNN. Well, 50% of the things they cover are totally different. Mm-hmm. So you don't get, it's not just that they have difference of opinions about the stuff that's going on. They report totally different things.
True.
Anyway, the Constitution, my contention, Sue might argue with it, is that the Constitution itself is based on Enlightenment ideas, not on traditional Christian ideas. And so what we get in the Constitution, our political structure, is based on reason, rationality, and you being educated enough not to make screwy mistakes in how you vote. Now we're ready for Ben Franklin. That's you.
That's me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Benjamin Franklin. He was, if you ever think about it, Benjamin Franklin was a little bit different from all the other founding fathers. He was, in fact, from a different generation. By the time the Revolution came around, Benjamin Franklin was well into his middle ages, whereas a lot of the other founding fathers were just coming into their own. They were young, like a half a generation younger than Benjamin Franklin, he was born in 1706. Like this thing's right on top of me. He was born in 1706 into a middle-class family in Boston. He was actually an urban child. He grew up on Milk Street, which is right in the center of Boston. His father was actually from England. His mother was from Nantucket. But Nantucket was not a she place back then. That didn't get him anything special. He did not, but he was one of 17 children. Yes. His father was married twice. His first wife had 7 children. His second wife had 10 children. He was the 15th of the children. He was the last of his sons, his 10th son. His parents were very active in their local congregational church. It was right across the street, as a matter of fact. Benjamin Franklin was baptized on the day he was born. His parents went to church twice a week, generally. So Benjamin Franklin was well-versed in his religion. They wanted him to grow up to become a member of the clergy. However, becoming a member of the clergy took years of study, and his family, as you might imagine, with 17 children, did not have a lot of money. So actually, Benjamin Franklin only had 2 years of formal schooling at Boys Latin School, which was basically a grammar school, teaching him how to write. However, he became a voracious reader afterwards, so he is largely self-taught. So in his childhood, like I said, his family attended the Congregational Church twice a week. He attended regularly with them. He claims to have read the Bible in its entirety by the age of 5. He was a pretty bright kid, he may have, but we don't know that, we cannot prove that. However, he would have been part of the Puritan movement. In other words, they were trying to purify the Protestant religion of all of those Catholic practices. At the age of 12, he was apprenticed to his older brother. I'm not sure exactly what number older he was, but he was significantly older than Benjamin. He owned a printing business. As a matter of fact, he established the first independent printing business in New England. It was called the New England Courant. Benjamin was not altogether happy working for his older brother. I know it's hard to believe that brothers don't always get along. But he was not altogether happy. He wanted to be able to write for the New England Courant, but his older brother wanted none of that. Stay in your place, little bro. So instead, Benjamin Franklin adopted the persona of Silence Dogood, who was a middle-aged woman. It wasn't a middle-aged woman, it was Benjamin Franklin all along. She would send in articles that were widely read, much appreciated. She got proposals of marriage. The whole time it was Benjamin Franklin. When his older brother found out, he was not happy, to say the least. As a matter of fact, he occasionally would discipline his younger brother physically, and this did not make Benjamin happy at all. So he disliked working for his brother. He didn't like the harsh treatment. He ran away at the age of 17 while he was still apprenticed. This would have been illegal at the time. He would have become a felon, technically, having run away from his duty and his legal obligations. But he ran to Philadelphia. So these pictures up here are pictures that the building is the Beefree Library in Philadelphia. It is a library where Benjamin Franklin eventually became postmaster. It is the only library, I thought this was interesting, the only library in the United States that does not fly the flag of the United States in front of it, because it would not have been there at the time Ben Franklin was there. So it has a special exemption. The other structure is called the Ghost House. It's really an outline of the house that Benjamin Franklin would have lived in Philadelphia. It's not there anymore. It was torn down in 1812. But they erected this house to kind of give you the idea of where it stood and how large it might have been. So Benjamin Franklin, by the time he was the age of 15, had moved from being a devout Christian, a Puritan with his parents, to questioning the things that he had learned in church. He started doubting Christian revelation. Is everything we know coming from God, really? Was his thought process. He was drawn to deist arguments, meaning he saw God as a creator who started the world, started the natural world, and then stepped back and let progress take its course. He encountered more thoughts of these thoughts in books that he followed and read, and he soon became, by the age of 15, what he called a thorough deist. This does not mean that he was not active in religion. When he was in Philadelphia, he stopped attending church regularly. He didn't go to the same church all the time. He found sermons somewhat boring. He particularly did not like sermons that were doctrinal in nature. But he did go to churches where he thought there would be a morality lesson taught. So this is one of the churches that he attended more or less regularly initially. It's the Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia. Instead of going to church every Sunday, he used Sundays as his day of study, what he would call a day of study. So as an adult, he may not have attended church, and he was looking for sermons that included more moral substance, but he preferred to stay home and study at home quietly. He would write, he would work on self-improvement, he did a lot of reading, and he was self-educated in these areas. However, he was generous in nature. He may not have gone to the same church regularly, but he did give to churches in his neighborhood. Even though his church attendance was occasional, and he was avoiding those sermons that he didn't find morally edifying, let's say, he did give a lot of financial support to churches in his area. Examples of some of the churches that he gave to were the First Christian Church of Philadelphia, that first picture, but also the Moravian Church, the German Reformed Church, the Catholic Church, the local Jewish congregation, and many of the Baptist and Methodist churches in the area. So he may not have believed in an established type of religion, but he did believe that religion was important for the citizenry. However, I found this one quote amusing. He explicitly wrote that he preferred lighthouses over churches because lighthouses are more useful. Just saying. One thing, what he did believe in was the virtuous nature of man and the way that we should all become virtuous. He wrote what he called the 13 virtues of man. Although he considered himself a deist, he looked around and he said, now there's a problem with this. Just being a deist doesn't guarantee that I'm going to be a good person. And it doesn't guarantee that any of my friends out there are going to be good people either. So here's 13 personal improvement objectives that we all should have. And he kept track of these daily in a little book. And he would put a little black tick mark next to anything where he found himself falling short that day. And he would try to improve on it the next day. So his goal was to always improve himself. So these are pretty good. We'll run through them real quick. Temperance in food and drink. Silence, use your words purposefully. Order, keep your life organized. Resolution, keep your commitments. Frugality, waste nothing, spend wisely. Industry, work diligently. Sincerity, be honest and be kind. Justice, always be fair. Moderation, avoid excesses and overreaction. Cleanliness, maintain a clean body, clean clothes, and clean habits. Tranquility, cultivate calmness. Chastity, practice sexual responsibility. And humility, imitate Jesus and Socrates. Be pure, modest, and teachable.
Whoops.
Is the next one you?
Yeah, I just said, oops.
Oops. Try to keep that teachable, right?
Okay. He was also a Mason. Do we have anybody Masons in here now? No. Okay. Well, the Masonic order, even though it's based on some Christianity and some Old Testament Christianity, it's also extremely emphasis on the values of benevolence and religious tolerance of other people. And so there's this sense among Masons that he liked because of that thing that we called his morality. So, because from my perspective, the value that he saw in the Christian faith was it gave authority to the moral perceptions that he had of how you should live. Because without those, they just have this nice list of things you ought to do and believe and live by. And he tried to live by them. So I give him high marks for that. But he recognized that for the rest of us, it was good to have religion because religion gave authority to live the way he thought you needed to live. So I'll be happy with you to take those 13 virtues home with you and put your notebook out and see how you do every day this week. Christians didn't like him, however. They saw some immediate conflict. I mean, they even objected to the invention of the lightning rod because it interfered with God's show of divine displeasure, which lightning is. You know, whenever you're hit by lightning, it shows that God's against you. And so the Christians of his age were very opposed to the lightning rod even. These are some quotes from good old Ben. Despite the fact that he established a church, a place where any preacher could preach that wanted to preach. Anybody that wanted to could preach. And he was very close friends of George Whitefield. And if you remember, I've told you before, The Great Awakening, it's only $6 on Amazon now if you want to stream it. Very nice story. Sue and I went to it, and we both liked it, right? Here are some other things that he said. I found Christian dogma unintelligible. Early in life, I absented myself from Christian assemblies. So even though he went to church at times, he thought lighthouses were more valuable and religion was not very important. He supported Christ Church. That's when Christ Church Episcopal Church, and had a pew there. I always thought this was a good idea. Let's see how many things. If you want to sit in the same seat on Sunday morning, you have to pay a bounty of $5,000. And then I wouldn't have to raise any money to keep the budget. It would just automatically flow in because you bought your seat. Because there's enough of you who wouldn't sit anywhere else but that seat that it would pay its own way. Next up, we're back to Sue.
Are you going to do the?
Am I doing it?
The what? Quick facts or?
Okay, yes, I am doing it. Thomas Jefferson, even during his own lifetime, there was great debate whether he had any faith whatsoever. He was regarded as not a Christian by so many people. I think we're supposed to be writing down now
What do you know?
we know about Thomas Jefferson. He's the guy who wrote that sentence that we talked about. What do you know about him? Farmer? Louder. He founded the University of Virginia. his wife died when, after her third miscarriage, I think it is, and after 2 children, and he promised he wouldn't marry anybody else to her. So he had a girlfriend, one of his slaves. We know that for a fact now. DNA's shown it. Sally Hemings.
Anything else?
What? His wife's half-sister, because his father had relationships with the slave.
And that was not unusual.
That was not unusual, that's true. But third president?
Is that it?
I would add he started political parties. Actually, the Democrats claim him. Remember, we have Jefferson Day dinners now, but he was really more like a Republican because he believed the farmers should be the ones that's we ought all to be farmers, and the Federalists were all the industrialists. And so we've kind of switched parties around.
He designed a number of pieces of furniture.
He did.
Designed furniture. He wrote his own Bible. It wasn't his own Bible. What did he?
Don't steal all my thunder.
What he did was, I think we're going to have a slide about that. What he did was go through the New Testament and take out all of the stories about miracles. Anything supernatural, out it went. So any story about an angel or anything like that is out of the Bible. The only things we get left in the Bible were his moral instructions. And you can actually see the Jefferson Bible down at the Library of Congress. They have it open. I mean, I don't think you can page through it, but you could actually see it. Oh, there was what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Am I here or you?
That's me.
Okay.
Okay. Some other interesting facts about Thomas Jefferson. He did invent a swivel chair. He used it when he was writing the Declaration of Independence. He loved mockingbirds. He kept a mockingbird named Dick as a pet. It sat on his shoulder and was allowed to fly around the White House free. So he expected Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to find mammoths out west. Like Fred said, they didn't know about dinosaurs. He thought maybe mammoths were still living out west when they went out there. Very interesting person. But Thomas Jefferson was, in fact, taller than George Washington. He was 6'3". He was tall and lanky, could be described as languid. He was also very anxious. He did not like talking in front of people. You know, the play Hamilton and many of the movies show him as a, determined and, kind of a forceful young man. He was not like that at all. He would have been the guy most likely to be looking at his shoes when he walked into the room. He was not going to come into the room and dominate the room. He was slightly awkward. You could even call him gauche, perhaps. He did not want to write the Declaration of Independence. He was pushed, he really wanted to write a constitution for Virginia, but he was pushed into writing the Declaration of Independence by Benjamin Franklin and by John Adams. Once it was written, however, he thought he'd done a pretty doggone good job. He was pretty proud of it. And when he was challenged and some of the revisions came about, he became somewhat sulky. He did not like that. He told Ben Franklin, I have thought about this. And Benjamin Franklin said, yeah, I know, but this will be better. So he was a very complex man. These pictures up here are some of the pictures of his childhood. He was born on Shadwell Plantation in Shadwell, Virginia, which is kind of central Virginia. We call Southside Richmond, Virginia. His family was well off, so he was born into the elite. However, at the age of 2, he moved to Tuckahoe, which is just west of Richmond, And the reason why he did that was Tuckahoe is a Randolph property. The Randolphs were relatives of his wife Jane. His wife was Jane Randolph Jefferson. The Randolphs were in a whole nother level, financially speaking, however. So when William Randolph was dying or died, he asked Peter Jefferson and Jane to come and move into his home and take care of his orphan children. So Jefferson grew up in Tuckahoe from the ages of about 2 till the ages of about 9, surrounded by his cousins and surrounded by a whole nother level of luxury, eliteness. This is, you may remember, you may know that Thomas Jefferson had a taste for the finer things in life. It's probably started here. He probably started with growing up in this kind of environment, seeing what life could be. This is where he got his first English teaching, his earliest formal education also. But when his father dies, he's about 14 years old, and he's back at Shadwell now. He inherits about 5,000 acres and about 40 enslaved people. So he is, for the next 2 years, from 14 to 16, he spends administering his estate with his father's executors until he just can't stand it anymore. He wants to get out of there. He wants to get out from under the pressures of that type of life. And he goes to the College of William and Mary. And there he is surrounded by Enlightenment ideas and the revolutionary ideas. He studied law there with George Wythe and came back to his native area, back close to Shadwell, eventually to build Monticello, that you'll see up there. I added this in.
It's okay.
So there were a couple of ideas that really were foundational to Thomas Jefferson. One is that the majority rules, but the minority has rights. So the idea that Fred said about individual rights was always important to him, recognizing that the majority does play a role. So the majority rules, but individuals have rights. There are minority rights. The other thing that he believed was that farmers were the chosen people of God. So whereas, for instance, Alexander Hamilton could see a future for the nation full of mercantile and trade, that's not the way Jefferson saw it. He was strictly an agrarian economy guy. He thought that if we strayed too far from those agrarian roots, that we'd all go downhill fast. So he really believed that God wanted us to be an agrarian society. So he regularly attended church throughout his life. If you remember early on, I said church was not just for worship back in colonial times. Church was also an opportunity to be with your neighbors and your friends. It was a social event. It was also a political event. So he attended church, even though he may have started thinking more along the lines of rational ideas. He had an Anglican upbringing, but he believed in the Enlightenment theories of rationalism, of thinking things through. He thought you could discover anything if you just followed the rational thought far enough. But he did have a fierce commitment to religious liberty. So he attended church kind of almost as a symbolic support also. He did not believe that there should be an established religion for everyone, but he believed everyone needed religion because that would be the moral foundation for that educated people. So he largely practiced this by attending services, showing that he believed in and supported religion, but his adult life was more centered on private devotionals, his moral reflection, and the study of Jesus's teachings. It was not, his own religious practices were not founded necessarily in church attendance. So he rejected the divinity of Christ, part of that rational thinking. He was a devout theist. He believed in God, but he thought God was not intimately involved in our day-to-day lives through miracles. He believed that rational religion would help you think through anything, and he had Unitarian tendencies. In other words, he was did not believe in the Trinity, but he was morally centered and deeply religious when it came to being committed to religious liberty. He admired Jesus' moral teachings, particularly. He rejected and avoided some common religious beliefs and practices of his time. He did not go to church religiously. No other way to say it. He didn't attend all the time. He did not accept that clergy had the final authority or absolute authority. He did not participate in the Great Awakening that George Whitefield and Benjamin Franklin were friends over, and he did not participate in that evangelical movement. He did not believe in that. He called his a rational faith. And by that, he meant rational Christianity. He believed and taught, or he believed that Jesus taught the purest moral philosophy that was ever available to humanity. So what he meant by rational Christianity was that reason had the final authority, that you have the ability to think it through and come to the conclusions that are correct. He thought that Jesus was a moral teacher, not necessarily a divine being. He revered Jesus' ethics, but denied the virgin birth or the resurrection. He did not believe in miracles. He thought that natural religion and moral order were I thought you were going to interrupt me,
No.
were the word of the day. He believed in a benevolent creator that established a rational universe, and that he did not intervene, but that universe had its own rational and benevolent operations. So we talked a little bit about the Jefferson Bible. He didn't call it the Jefferson Bible. He didn't call it a Bible at all, as a matter of fact. He took the New Testament. It wasn't the Old Testament at all. He took the New Testament and took a razor to it and cut sections out. And what he created was called The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth. He never intended this to be public. He did not make it public on purpose. I mean, it was discovered after his death, obviously. He removed the miracles and the resurrection, supernatural elements. He kept only Jesus' moral teachings, his ethical teachings. He considered it to be the most sublime and benevolent of moral codes. So he used this book for his own spiritual guidance and his own solace. It was not meant to be public at any point in time. It was his own devotional, if you will. So I'd like to consider Jefferson kind of as a life through time. So he was vastly different from most of the Virginia gentlemen of his day. He called himself a real Christian, meaning he had his own rational and moral variety of Christianity. He once said, "I am a sect unto myself." He knew that there were not a lot of people out there like him. He believed that he himself had figured out the real Christian way of life. His image has changed across time. In the 19th century, he was seen as a hero of democracy and expansion, that Louisiana Purchase that expanded the United States. In the era of progress, he was seen as a champion of education and science. He was vitally interested in science and inventions, and his books, as a matter of fact, became the basis, the very beginning of the Library of Congress, which he thought education of the citizenry was vital. During the Civil Rights era, we focused on his slavery and racial views. And today we know him as a paradox. We see him as an author that talks about equality, but yet owned enslaved people. We see him as a visionary thinker, but we know he had profound blind spots. So through time, each generation examines him with their own kind of moral questions. As a matter of fact, I take exception with Jefferson writing. He did not write the words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." What Jefferson wrote was, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable." He knew that these truths needed to be grounded in the divine. He wanted to use that word sacred and undeniable. It was Franklin who crossed that out and wrote
True.
self-evident in. That's the point where he said, trust me, boy, this is better. So he did not deny the need for God or the need for religion in our lives. Instead, he thought that we were going about it the wrong way, let's say. He also had thoughts on slavery. He had originally, in the Declaration of Independence, written in an argument against slavery, which in order to get the Southern support had to be pulled out. But he said this on slavery: "What a stupendous and incomprehensible machine is man, who can endure toil, famine, stripes, imprisonment, and death itself in vindication of his own liberty, and then the next moment inflict on his fellow man a bondage, 1 hour of which would be fraught with more misery than the ages of that for which he rose in rebellion to oppose." So he, intellectually at least, knew slavery was wrong. In fact, thought slavery would die a natural death, because why would we have slaves when so many people would want to come to these United States and would want to work and become farmers? He couldn't see why that wouldn't just push slavery out in the future. He thought it would go away on its own. So he had profound blind spots, we will say that. So his religious quotes, one of the things that he did leave us with was religious freedom and religious liberty. He says he opposed the state support of churches. He and Madison worked together to successfully take taxes out of churches so that they were no longer involved in the business of churching. He said, "I am for freedom of religion and against all maneuvers to bring about a legal ascendancy of one sect over another." So he wanted everybody to be able to practice their own form of religion.
It was interesting you mentioned that he took the slavery text out of the Declaration of Independence, because what that passage did was it blamed slavery on the King of England, because the English people profited by the importation of slaves. So slavery was because the English imposed that on them. That was, if you read the whole Declaration of Independence, it's really an argument that says, here's what the English did to us, and that's why we ought to be free. There's a whole list. It's kind of like a legal document, a case in point.
There's 27 points.
27 points. He was 83 when he died. Unlike Hamilton, he did not have a conversion in the later part of his life. And he died, I think I mentioned this, you know what day he died? July 4th, 50 years after the Declaration of Independence. So today's an anniversary of his death, as well as John Adams, who died that same day. And a matter of fact, the last thing that Adams said was, "Jefferson still lives." Because even though they were opponents to each other politically, they had after they were out of office, they got back together and exchanged letters and reestablished their friendship. We have a number of memorials that you know about. I'm sure everybody's been here, right? Raise your hand. You've been to the Jefferson Memorial? Oh, yeah. Oh, some of you haven't. You get on the stick, folks. My goodness. I mean, it is safe to go to Washington, they tell me. You know, this is a memorial to Jefferson. Did you know that?
Yeah,
I didn't.
I've seen that.
Seen that one, yes.
I've been in that one.
Yeah, you go up in the little cars, yes. That's because
Go
of
on an
Lewis and
angle,
Clark
right?
and the opening up of
No,
the
thank
area.
It is the Jefferson Memorial.
And it is called that. These are all memorials to Jefferson as well. then, and as well as the reading room in the Library of Congress is dedicated to Jefferson. Now we're going to move on, and I think this is still me, right?
Yep.
To James Madison, and you're not going to know very much about his religion because he kept it very much private. He doesn't write about his religion. He doesn't talk about his faith. He goes to church regularly as an Anglican. He's a best friend of Thomas Jefferson, but he says, look, that's a private matter. Doesn't have anything to do with anybody else but me. He did have a childhood religion where he was an Anglican. He was the youngest member of the Continental Congress at the age of 29. I mean, these guys, some of these guys were young. He is called the father of American law. In other words, he sees himself and saw himself as mainly the constitutional lawyer. And he designed the structure of the Constitution. He's one of the people who wrote the Federalist Papers, was very involved in writing the Constitution, and is based on that. He wrote 29 of the Federalist Papers. They were the pamphlets that went out to everybody that convinced them to vote for, because they had to get everybody to agree in order to have the new Constitution. He drafted the Bill of Rights. We have the Bill of Rights in the Constitution because of James Madison. He was silent on almost everything else about his religion. Very little else does he talk about his own personal faith. Writes nothing about it, speaks nothing about it. You know that he was the fourth president, right? He was after Jefferson, and then after him is Monroe. So the first five presidents, 4 of them were from Virginia. Until there was the most from any state until Ohio came along and got 9. Go Ohio. His most important writing was this talking about religious assessments, because he was opposed to the establishment of religion where you use taxes to pay religion. And he was very aware of presidential power, and he would not have agreed with any, in fact, he opposed any proclamation by a president that said pray or have a special day of fasting and prayer. He regarded those as unconstitutional. Of course, he didn't have any say about that because the Supreme Court was the one that makes the decision of that kind of thing. Here's some quotes about religion from him. And for somebody who wants them, they can look at all of these things. He was the best friend of James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. They actually lived each other. If anybody been to Madison's house? Yeah, it's a very interesting place. Got a picture of it somewhere here, because Montpelier, it used to belong to the DuPont person, and it used to be pink, and now the government, once they got it as a National Historic Site, they restored it to what it looks like as when Madison lived there. He was most insistent on the separation of church and state. He was of the advocates of that. He would have been totally opposed to things like the 10 Commandments in school classrooms. Absolutely not. No way Madison would have gone along with it, anything like that. The new law in Texas to read Bible stories to kids in school, absolutely opposed to that, unless it's a private school. First of medicine. Why did Madison put it first? Why do you put something first?
Because it's most important.
Because it's the most important. That's why the Congress is the most important in the Constitution, because the people who wrote it thought, here's the real power. The president doesn't have a lot of power. He just has to enforce what the Congress has said. And the Supreme Court has to decide whether somebody has overstepped their power or not. I thought you might like some cartoons. If you want copies of this, I have some. Here's the estate now, Montpelier. It's down outside of Fredericksburg, Virginia. He died in 1836. Boy, I shouldn't say 19 on there. 1836. He's the last constitutional person on the Declaration to die. Not many memorials. There's an office building named after him, and then he does get a university right down the road from us, James Madison University. And here's my Thomas Paine stuff. George Washington called him the battle sword. Without his sword of that pamphlet, revolution would have been successful. Okay.
I'm gonna
At
say
the
one
end
word
of
about.
this, we have one more slide from.
I'm
there
gonna
we
say
go.
one word about Thomas Paine.
And Susan's going to give you a farewell summary here.
All right. One word about Thomas Paine. Fred mentioned that people thought he was an atheist. People did think that, but he was not an atheist. He was accused of that because he wrote something called The Age of Reason, which attacked the Bible and the clergy and all sorts of things. But it's not that he did not believe in Christianity. He did. He believed in its morality, just not in the churches. He believed in reason, just not in revelation. His religious thought was, he would have described it himself as a militant deism, but he did believe in God. He believed in a creator. So he was not actually an atheist. But because of the faith of our fathers, we've learned a lot about our country and its founding. There was a time when all politics were religious and all religion was political. Your gods were determined by the tribe you were born into, or the city, or the nation that you were born into, and that shaped your daily life. It established your laws and determined who your leaders were. Even kings depended on the divine right to rule. But the American experiment broke that ancient pattern. Our founders were remarkable. They were not perfect, but they were remarkable men. They possessed a courage and conviction, steadfast trust in God that enabled them to imagine a different future. They lived in a unique time, a time that was profoundly influenced by the Enlightenment. It was a brief time where new ideas about liberty and human rights became conceivable. When these Enlightenment ideas converged with Christianity, a religion that could make a distinction between civil authority and spiritual authority, when they came together, the founders envisioned a new experiment in freedom, one that was grounded in hope and possibility and religious liberty. From these ideas emerged a people that were prepared to shape their own destiny and create a new religion, a new nation. They remind us that faith is not inherited, not merely inherited. It is lived, it's tested, and it's strengthened throughout the generations. So now, today, as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, I think we should thank God for the faith of our fathers, that they were enabled this vision to be possible today.
1, 2, 3. USA, USA, USA. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.